say Austin and San Antonio are both great cities. We're just different.
Yes, I think Austin defines itself on three things. Austin defines itself on music, politics, and football.
You don't need to know Spanish to get around in San Antonio, but you don't need to know English either.
Austin's a fun place to visit.
Austin is a lovable place. People come and visit and it's hard not to want to live here.
I think we are again at a crossroads.
The issue of Austin and San Antonio has fascinated me my entire career, right? For two cities that are only 80 miles apart, there's been very little interaction between those two cities. If you were to use something called a gravity model, which predicts the interaction between cities, you would have a much lower level of interaction between those than what the model would predict. And the model's being driven basically by how big the cities are and how close they are to each other. So why is that, right? Well, certainly at the top of the list is the cities historically have been living almost on different cultural planets. You know, the notion that San Antonio functionally is the northeasternmost city in Mexico, that's not that far out of the realm. I mean, it's functionally, economically, ethnically tied to Mexico. And so it's more than just 80 miles, right? There's some big, huge border between Austin and San Antonio. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's probably somewhere between San Marcos and New Braunfels.
I'd say we're an international city, that we reflect the incoming demographics across the United States. We're very much a Mexican city. When you look at the United States, we are closer to Mexico, friendship-wise, economic-wise, relatives, friends, than any other city in the United States. So I'm real proud of the fact how close a relationship we have with Mexico. In fact, one of my sister-in-laws is a Mexican national.
Mine came to visit from Omaha, Nebraska one time. He's a doctor, and he came to visit us in San Antonio. And he had planned to go down to Mexico, but he said after having been here in San Antonio, he didn't feel like he needed to go to Mexico.
We're more like Mexico in our culture than certainly Austin is, and that it's nice to go to a place that you feel comfortable in. And one of the reasons they like San Antonio is that it's a large city, it's a fairly large economy, and it's a culture that they're comfortable in.
The Hispanic influence in San Antonio is just, I mean, it just permeates everything in a wonderful way. It permeates the art and the music and the food. And you know, you take for granted that you can't get amazing breakfast tacos and fantastic Tex-Mex everywhere. I've been in San Antonio for going on 8 years. It'll be 8 in the summer. I moved here the summer of 2006 for school.
Yeah, I'm from San Antonio. I was born here, Robert B. Green, and grew up on the south side, and ended up graduating from Southwest and moving to San Marcos and eventually Austin after that. Yeah, music's always been a big part of my life growing up, and you know, my family, and just it was always around. You know, no matter what, whether you know, my mom or uncle were playing music, you know, physically, or you know, just lots of records and albums. You know, just growing up constantly. So there's always something going on, you know, with the family and stuff.
San Antonio is definitely a colorful city. I would say it's definitely a melting pot of all kinds of influences, and therefore then the color comes to life with that.
My first impression was that it was very sprawling, and it felt different in different parts. You know, you can go downtown and see nothing but the cheesy, kitschy Alamo stores, you know, tchotchke shops, and Ripley's Believe It or Not, and that kind of thing. Or you can come to Southtown, and it has this totally different kind of cool and restaurant-focused vibe. Or you can go up north, and it's, you know, suburb city. It's so it sprawls so much that it was hard to kind of put a label on the whole thing.
I think there's a lot more here than most people think about. Most people, I think, just assume that San Antonio, the Alamo, you know. But to me, there's a lot more to it, you know. And it's a beautiful place. It definitely is.
Describe it as more conservative or liberal?
You know, it's funny because it kind of seems like it's a little bit of both, you know, especially with the older generation. I think are a little more conservative, you know. With the new generation, I think it's becoming more liberal. And then I guess with all the military, you know, presence that's here, or the bases and Air Force and all that kind of keeps it a little more conservative. But I think as a whole, it's kind of mixed, you know, it's kind of in between.
I think the dress maybe is a little more formal in San Antonio than in Austin. And I wonder if that isn't maybe the Mexican culture, Mexican influence more predominant here. People are more apt to dress up for things, and you see more casual dress maybe in Austin.
Like I said earlier about what Augie had told me, San Antonio police ran their young people and their creative class out of town as fast as they could. And those that chose to stay, stayed and either kind of found a way to live, you know, kind of either less that way. I mean, you know, there are lots of colorful characters in San Antonio. I'm not saying San Antonio doesn't have colorful characters. I'm just saying that it was scary to wave your freak flag back in the day. It really was, you know.
More conservative than Austin, you know. In Austin, people just have that let's have a good time attitude, which, you know, I mean, you can find here in San Antonio, but just a lot more. Again, the word conservative threw it out there, but I mean, Austin people are crazy. They are, but it's the good kind of crazy. You know, the kind of crazy that you want to do once a month or once a week. And I mean, I have a ton of friends that take the drive up there to go party up there. I mean, it's worth it. It's so much fun. I mean, example, you go to Austin, you ask someone to show you the boobs, they probably will. San Antonio, they'll probably come up with an excuse that they're going to get married one day and they're saving themselves.
I love San Antonio. Born and raised here, been here my whole life. It's got a lot of charm. Small city feel. It's kind of growing though. You know, the scenes are getting a lot bigger. Music, cycling, the art scene's out of control. It's a lot of fun. Great restaurants, really nice, down-to-earth people.
Austin is very unique in the fact when it comes to film, even though historically San Antonio is the original Hollywood. So the very first film to win an Academy Award was Wings. It was filmed in 27, came out in 28, won the Oscar that year. And it could have been the original Hollywood. Film production started here in San Antonio. Being that this is a military town, so that influence was already, you know, the infrastructure was there. Unfortunately, due to whatever multiple reasons, there was enough support, there was enough economic support in the community, you know, it fled. But Austin all of a sudden decided to take ownership, and they decided they wanted to be the film capital of the state. So we didn't claim it, we lost it, they got it.
The San Antonio is the land of mañana because I think everybody's so laid back, you know. I think it moves at a different pace. I think And it's kind of interesting because it's decisive though. It's like there might be as much happening here as any other city, but with more concentrated effort. I think San Antonio is a city where potentially siestas still exist, you know? You can work hard and you can also find that time to just stop without feeling as if everything's going to pass you by and overlook your efforts, you know?
Someone told me once that if you live on a waterbed according to Feng Shui, that you have this really wishy-washy kind of just like, oh, it's cool, it's fine, I'll do it tomorrow, you know, real sleepy sort of mindset. And somebody told me that in relation, San Antonio, since we're on a giant aquifer, we're living on a giant waterbed, and that we're the only major city that's on a giant waterbed, so the whole city has this feel to it that is unlike any other major city.
For a long time I used to tell people it was the biggest small town in the world. In some ways it doesn't so much feel like that anymore, but in other ways it'll probably always be that way.
I mean, San Antonio is very, what's the word? They like to stay home. They're very neighborhood centric, I guess. Yeah. They want to grow up in the same place and they want to be in their neighborhood for generations, and they know their family's going back 30, 40 years, and they grew up with the same people, and they want their kids to stay there and grow up with the same kids. I guess maybe that's part of what keeps San Antonio slow.
San Antonio definitely has a very, you know, counterculture vibe to it, you know, because of our experiences, you know, as being San Antonio, as being San Anto, as being Chicano, as being Americano here, you know, as being Pocho here, you know, that's who we are, and it impacts what we do.
People come to Austin, and I was always sorry to say I think people tended to leave San Antonio, you know, and although I've known in later years people who particularly came up here to Austin from San Antonio and have now moved back, most of the ones that left stayed away. But at the same time, I think that I know more people that stayed in more people that I went to high school with who stayed in San Antonio and didn't go anywhere than anywhere else. Because lots of people I know about, they just scattered afterwards. But I know so many people who are still in San Antonio, still living in the same neighborhood they were living in when we were in high school, you know. And so I think maybe that speaks a little bit to that traditionalist of family that has to do with the Hispanic nature or the Mexican nature of the San Antonio culture. Yeah. You know, and maybe that's it. Maybe not. Who knows?
Do you see differences or similarities in Austin and San Antonio?
Austin is an awesome city also. I lived there for a couple of years myself. When I lived there in the late 80s, early 90s, Austin was the scene, you know. We always went to Austin every weekend because they had the best clubs, and 6th Street was awesome. And then as we got older, 6th Street was way too much. Busy, crazy, so we'd venture off to 7th in Colorado, hang out in the gay district, you know, and just kind of watch people there and go to the clubs there. The Austin cycling scene's gigantic too, and sometimes they come and ride with us, and some of them go up and ride with them too, so they have their critical mass ride also, and so we have the Last Friday ride, and so it's a cool scene. Austin's awesome. I wouldn't ever live there again. I don't really like to even go there. Even when my brother lived there, I would, it was maybe once a month we'd go up there because traffic is just ridiculous. So, but I love Austin. Austin's got a lot of great parks and a lot of positive influence for sure.
Yeah, certainly this is the town where you settle down and have kids, and I think we hear the biggest, you know, complaints or the biggest outcries from the youth that, you know, end up moving away anyway.
Gosh, I love Austin so much. I love San Antonio, but it is different. You know, I would like to see San Antonio get more supportive of just music in general as a city, you know. It's great that we have Luminaria now, at least that's something, you know, like we have a big arts festival, which is awesome because it has, you know, different kinds of art, like, you know, film, music, and things like that. But I would really like to see us get something more like the South by Southwest or the ACL. You know, I'd like for that to kind of, for our city to kind of support that kind of, you know, thing or idea. I mean,
I think that Austin and San Antonio are hugely different cities. I mean, and I enjoy Austin very much, and I love San Antonio, but just you know, the whole feel of this city is different. It's a lot slower here. Like I said, it's slower paced in a good way. Austin has so many more young people, really like accessible. You know, in San Antonio there are a lot of young people, but it's hard for, I think, when young people move here and they're first trying to get plugged in, sometimes it's hard to find where the other ones like them, you know, the other young professionals are hanging out.
That's a story that I've seen so many times, every year of my life, you know, for the past, you know, 20 years since I went to high school. It's like, oh, I can't wait to get out of this town. This town's just holding me back. It doesn't understand my art, my music. I gotta get out.
Seagulls are a lot more conservative here. Seagulls are so keen on the fact that they're 25, 26, 27, oh, I'm gonna settle down, or oh, I'm gonna get engaged. And it's like, why? Why? Whereas, like, Austin is like, I'm 27, like, why the hell would I want to get married right now? There's so many women I haven't slept with.
I've always thought the Spurs championships gave the city a boost of self-confidence that it's sorely needed. One of the things I think that is a true and a truism about San Antonio is that we kind of have collective self-esteem, and we might deny it and loudly proclaim otherwise, but it's kind of deep in there, and I think you know, things like the Spurs winning 3 championships, is it 4 now? Yeah, 4 rings. You know, that put us in more of a national spotlight than we've been in many ways in a long time, and I think it gave us a boost.
So is San Antonio still lame?
Yeah. That was 5 or 6 of us kicking ideas around, you know, just bantering, I guess, and somehow, I really don't remember the exact way it came out, but I said, you know, we should make bumper stickers that keep saying something later. Obviously, we're talking about Keep Austin Weird, and it was a reaction to that in a way.
We hand screened the first batch of a little over 7,000 stickers, and in, I believe, close to 3 weeks, they had all been handed out for free all over the city.
What was the reception like when that came out?
It was very strong.
It was pretty positive. I mean, yeah. Very, very little negative reaction. Over the whole course of doing it the last 10 years, there's been surprisingly little negative reaction.
Usually the mayor seems to make a comment about it at some point, whatever mayor it is.
Really?
Saying,
I guess
you know, they usually don't get it.
They take it at face value.
Yeah.
The people who do react negatively take it very much at face value, but San Antonio is not lame. In the early days, my stock response when people questioned it was, well, you know, or would ask about Keep Austin Weird and Keep San Antonio. I said San Antonio is about as lame as Austin is weird.
When I moved back, I moved with my grandmother, who lives over off of Martin in Sausamota, and
to the west side.
Yeah, it was the west side. And I remember the day my dad, we were driving down Sausamota towards Martin, and I was just kind of looking around, and I was like, wow, it's like nothing's really changed, you know. I kind of have a mixed feeling about being here in San Antonio just because of a lot of the poverty and the crime. But I know, like, in the back of my head, it doesn't matter where I go, that's still going to be around.
San Antonio has been a rock and roll town first, since the very beginning of rock and roll. So it just follows that San Antonio remains a rock and roll town.
San Antonio's remarkable propensity for the way it took up metal music. Yeah. You know, I mean, where did that come from? Well, I think it came from the fact that San Antonio had a large military population of young men and has a large young male Hispanic population, both of whom traditionally love metal music.
We're definitely, you know, we've been known as kind of the metal capital for many, many years, since I can remember, since I was like a kid. So I think definitely we're a rock town.
There's this period, there was a period in the 70s where I think it was very competitive between Austin and San Antonio, and that was really when the tide turned. And I always think about the Sex Pistols show as being San Antonio's kind of last shot at greatness in rock and roll before the metal thing took over and became what it was, and then San Antonio music progressed beyond that.
One of the great differences is the metal scene. There's metal bands that play here, but when the headlining road shows come through, they go to San Antonio. And you can trace that back to the beginnings of the punk scene. In 1978, the Sex Pistols went on a tour, so they were in San Antonio at Randy's Rodeo. That really spawned big changes between Austin and San Antonio, in that people who were ready for the next thing in music, they were rejecting the whole hippie culture and, you know, the cosmic cowboy themes, and were so drawn to this. That Sex Pistols performance really influenced majorly the scene here in Austin, and, like, you know, you've got the Hickoids in San Antonio. All of that is direct fallout from that one performance.
I think one of the big misconceptions of San Antonio is that it's strictly a heavy metal town. San Antonio started being a vital jazz town in the 1920s. They're huge conjunto fans, part of the birthplace of conjunto music. And Tejano, it was the center, and probably remains the center of Tejano music. So there's a big misconception. Yes, it is a heavy metal town. There's no doubt about it. But it's also a big city for a whole lot of other kinds of music.
So you were saying you have some favorite bands in San Antonio?
Oh yeah, well, I love the Texas Tornadoes, but there's also a very fun party band down there called Los No. 3 Dinners.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I mean, to me, like, you know, if you want a real San Antonio band, those guys are it, because they're just, you know, they sing about San Antonio, they celebrate San Antonio, they're from San Antonio, they sound like San Antonio. I mean, you know, I just think they're terrific. I love Pinata Protest. And I really like some of the younger bands like Heather Go Psycho, and you know, I mean, those girls really, I've got to look at them one day and I was going, yeah, girls. There's a lot of good music being made down there these days, and one of the problems is that they run into the contractual difficulty, where, you know, if you book a gig here in Austin, it says you can't play a gig within 90 miles of so it completely, you know, knocks out San Antonio for a lot of places, who will then usually choose to play Austin because we're the hipper market, you know.
As far as San Antonio goes, we definitely need to have a little bit more going in the way of parks and recreation. We need to have more bike lanes for sure, maybe wider bike lanes, you know, or a lane just dedicated to bikes where cars understand this is how it is, you know. We all skated in the streets and got hit by cars and in trouble with the law, and so there's a lot of really good skate parks here now too, so we have definitely come a long way as far as parks and recreation.
I think that was one of the best investments the county government made. We put about $200 million into the river going south. It's what we call the Mission Reach. It's the largest ecological restoration of an urban river in the United States. You know, tens of thousands of trees and grasses and bushes and flowers and trails and fish and canoe. And so it is really and truly a jewel. And every time I go down there, there's more and more people.
How would you say downtown San Antonio is on weekends and nights?
It's during the weekends. It's a pretty sleepy downtown area. You know, all the city office business, all the 8 to 5ers are, you know, they go to suburbia for the weekend, and downtown becomes pretty quiet.
The thing I noticed was San Antonio seemed to expand outward, whereas Austin, the downtown area, seemed to be more of the center of the city now.
That's a very good observation, and one which we're trying to change here. Since Mayor Castro came into office, we've had a real good close working relationship together, and we put in packages of incentives for additional housing in the downtown area, incentivized businesses to live down here, invested in public transportation from the streetcar to the multimodal terminals we will be building. So we're trying to create that urban lifestyle that Austin does have, that we did not have. And we're seeing some very rapid changes with what's happening out at the Pearl area, what's happening in Southtown. So we're really beginning to get two strong anchors, north and south, that's really, really starting to boom. I never did think I'd see the day that the South Side would come back, but it's on its way, and the near south of downtown is just coming along very well. So our city's changing right before our eyes, and people didn't want to or didn't think that that would happen. They didn't think anybody would want to live here. Well, we've got several thousand now within just the last few years that have chose to live in the central city.
San Antonio is a little slow to grow. I wish it was a little faster, but it is still kind of clicky. So if you're inside the loop, you're going to stay inside the loop. People that are in downtown don't want to go to the suburbs. They don't want to go outside. I guess 410 and 1604 seem to be the areas where people don't want to get past.
You know, something people always talk about that they would like to see more of in San Antonio, or rather see less of. They would rather see less of this brain drain, because with all these universities we have, most students leave, you know, but companies like Rackspace, people like Graham Weston, who are really devoted to like educating the workforce here and trying to create jobs that are going to keep and attract really talented young people or anyone. I think that's something that San Antonio is improving on, but could really continue to improve.
And Austin is a place where people like to stay. I mean, they've done a very good job of not only having that giant university there, creating a lot of people with bachelor's and master's and PhDs and other degrees, but of keeping them there.
And everybody here in San Antonio, I mean, this is the place that you're around a lot of San Antonians. Austin, it seems like it's all transplants now. You're around people from all over the country that have just recently moved there, trying to make it. You know, it's like the end of the rainbow for them. They're trying to find that pot of gold somewhere, and it's all over the place that Austin's it, you know, for music and for food.
I think the last 10 years has been, you know, the pace of change has definitely picked up.
Yes.
I poke my head out and there's all kinds of new developments regularly occurring. So
Literally, we're the short film mecca of the world. There's about half a dozen short films being shot on any given weekend in San Antonio. We have a lot of weekend warriors. In Austin, they've got a lot of episodic business, meaning for the television series. They have the serious money that drives a lot of resources into the community, a lot of money into the community, and that's really why the infrastructure is better suited in Austin for that. So for me as an actor, I'm constantly driving up 35 for auditions and for shoots because that's where they pay the bills. Anybody and everybody who's watching this, please help San Antonio not be lame and be competitive. Be film centric. Thank you.
So San Antonio is going through this amazing food renaissance, I would say. For the past year or so, there has just been a restaurant opening every month or more, with the Pearl Brewery complex and all of the development that's taking place there, commercial and residential. There are just so many new places to try. And I was recently having a conversation with someone where we were wondering, is there going to come a point where San Antonio and the people who live here cannot support all of the restaurants that are opening right now? Will we reach this critical mass where suddenly these fantastic restaurants and amazing chefs don't have enough people to fill their spaces? So I don't know. I don't think we're there yet. I hope not. But some of my favorites, the Monterey, Barbaro is an amazing pizza place. Bakery Lorraine, fantastic. Really, really top-notch pastries and croissants. The Cove is an amazing one. They sell local, sustainable and organic food. Their shrimp tacos are unbeatable, and that place is also a car wash and a laundromat. So, but there's a lot. I feel like in San Antonio, there's a lot of bring your dog, bring your kids, kind of ice house restaurants.
San Antonio is losing the small city charm and just. We're gonna be big city, We'll be the #1 largest city in the Americas. Hopefully not the fattest, but
Austin's great.
I love Austin. In Austin, it's a place you could come and grow.
I just like Austin.
The slogan in Austin is keeping it weird. Well, everybody has their way of keeping it weird.
Austin is, like I say, Austin is a good place to live, irrespective of the traffic.
I was actually born here in 1950 and mainly grew up in Fort Worth, came back to go to UT for a couple degrees, moved to New York, came back to Austin in '84 and been here since then. Well, it's a pretty city actually. Fort Worth is not a pretty city in a lot of ways, but it's just more relaxed. It's the liberal politics certainly appeal to me more.
Austin is a very casual town. I still feel like the movie Slacker is completely applicable. You still see all kinds of people like that around town.
What gave you the idea to move to Austin?
I think it was half just because I wanted to move out of my city I grew up in. It wasn't necessarily anything I didn't like about San Antonio. Although I certainly didn't appreciate it as much as if I had, come here later in life. Everyone takes for granted their hometown, I feel like. And I just, was really interested in music and film, and I felt like there was much more happening in Austin.
And my parents had a barbecue place there, so that, I guess, kind of hence the molding for the rest of my life. But moved to Austin about 18 years ago, and long enough, it's been a while. And I initially just moved here because I didn't want to live in Bryan College Station anymore. Turned 18 and it's like, well, where do you go? You go to Austin. And there just so happens to be tons of music. So, it's awesome. Austin's great. The first time I came here was for a show at Liberty Lunch. And, pretty much eating tacos a couple hours later, I was like, I think I'm gonna move here. Yeah, I mean, it's such a great place. I love living here. I can't imagine living anywhere else, really.
Summer of 1968. And I came from Detroit on a track scholarship to Houston-Tillerson, now University.
What was your first impression when you got here?
The first impression was, what have I got myself into? When the airport was out on Manor Road, so we took Manor Road. Another friend of mine, he's in the media in Houston, George Brown, got here the same time. He's from New York. And we had these trunks, so we didn't know where we were going. So basically, we just moved out of our homes back in Detroit. He was back from New York. And we came up Manor Road, and then we made that left turn on Chicon. And we got to Chicon and 12th Street. And at that time, they had brothers just hanging out. Just hanging out. And I'm thinking, this is what I just left. Brothers hanging out on the block. So we kept continuing on down to Houston-Tillerson.
My name is Lanny, otherwise known as Landingo. Good friend of Margaret Mosier's. In fact, we met at South by Southwest. I've been in Austin for 30 years.
30 years, okay.
Yeah, and I was one of those dang Yankees that they fussed about because my father was an IBM executive, and what is now the Domain, that was IBM Manufacturing, and he was one of the ones that opened up the printed wireboard plant that was down there. And kind of ironic, the only reason why I work for IBM today is because at the time out of high school I was working for HEB, and I was crying about it. Daddy got sick of listening to me, so all he did is he put the application in front of me and said, fill that out and shut up.
Back when I was a hippie, back in the 60s, this is like the one town it was cool to be a hippie. Pretty much everywhere else is like, watch out. It's just that whole reputation has just kind of stayed more open.
To me, Austin is so much the university. It's 50,000 students there, of course, right in the middle of Austin, the government buildings, the state capitol, and then you can walk from there to the university. It's such a force, the university there, the students there, the student body, the football games, the sports. It's such a big part of Austin.
It fits the definition of like most college towns, I think. Like, it's a young city, meaning like the population generally. I think there is a problem because of the collegeness of it. I think a lot of Austinites have sort of a extended adolescence where like, and I do it too. I'm in my 30s, but I don't think that I am. I still think that I'm in my 20s.
So I grew up in New York. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I moved here to go to UT. So I had an older brother who went to Madison for school, and I had been looking around, and I knew I wanted to get out of New York. And he kind of had suggested it and said it was a cool town, and I visited, and I loved it. I really liked the feel of it, and so I immediately just chose to come here. It was better than all the other places that I had visited. The other places were too small, too dreary, too gray, and yeah, so it fit. It was good. I'm glad I did it. I don't regret it. Once I moved here when I was 17, and I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends or family who came with me. And so I just kind of started exploring the city on my own and meeting people, and yeah.
Because of the big university there, it always struck me in Austin where you'd go to the corner store, to the convenience store, and the guy there working the cash register, he's probably got a master's degree in biology or something like that, Just you've got that kind of population, which we don't see so much in San Antonio. Of course, we've got all kinds of well-educated, intelligent people in San Antonio, but I think just everywhere in Austin you run into these people who are working on their advanced degrees and in the meantime taking some kind of job somewhere to make a little income.
The information industry, the computer information industry is getting huge here. One of the good things about Austin, because Austin is so laid back because of the music industry, because of the hippie culture and the what I call cray-cray country culture, is that
What does it say that again?
Cray Cray Country.
What's that?
Well, crazy country. What we are in the world of IT and computer science are able to do is, because we're so laid back, we can sit back at maybe at a concert like Blues on the Green or something like that, and all of a sudden, hey dude, yeah, and I know you from a conference or whatever, hey, and we'll kick back over a beer listening to somebody playing Blues on the Green, and meantime, while everybody else is off, because the concert was over a long time ago, we're still sitting back there kicking back, chilling, and all of a sudden we figured out a new way to do stuff, and now all of a sudden that's a new app that goes with Google.
The slogan, "Keep Austin Weird," kind of fell out of my mouth. It's year 2000, so it's been around a long time actually. And I was calling in a donation to a local radio station, KOOP, that's an all-volunteer radio station, and has some very strange programming. And my favorite show on it is called The Lounge Show, which is still on Saturday mornings. Great show. And so when I called in my donation, the person said, "Well, why are you donating to this show?" And I said, "Oh, it helps keep Austin weird." And the phrase just kind of clicked in my head. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she said, "Well, let's get some bumper stickers," and she got some, and it slowly took off from there.
What did it mean to you, keep Austin weird?
Well, of course, people have asked me what is weird, and it's that whole, it's like the pornography, you know it when you see it sort of thing. I wouldn't try to define it. It's just, there's good weird and there's bad weird. And this thing we're sitting in front of, this graffiti park that just grew up spontaneously. Great example of just people going nuts, and the city letting them do it, which is a nice thing. Our city's a little more lenient about things than I don't think you could do this in Dallas, probably. Our 1,000 food trucks or whatever it is we have, things like that. Things like that can just seem to fly here a little more. My favorite single thing when people ask me what's weird about Austin, I would say the Cathedral of Junk, which is a wonderful place in South Austin. This guy in his backyard just built this massive structure out of junk that's just wonderful.
Still a lot of live music in Austin?
Oh, heaven. Always. I mean, back in the 70s, there was 150 different venues that hosted live music. Even then.
Wow.
We held an exhibit called the Dead Clubs of Austin, where we documented over 100 clubs that had been in existence since the late 60s. There's a lot of ways the city is supportive, but they've pretty much just let it, go on its own.
Well, I think the biggest change happens in the 70s for Austin, because Austin is a sleepy town in 1970. By 1980, it is country, punk, and blues, and they were what was driving it. So that's a real change from just 10 years earlier, when, like I said, traditional country was sort of the way it went. But I think that what really changed for Austin, what trumps Austin over San Antonio on this, is when the Vulcan opens in 1968, and it's not that they took bands away from San Antonio by any means, because they, like many clubs in most college towns, were booking like folk acts and old blues acts and things like that. But now the Vulcan, which is only around 2 years, but then the Armadillo starts in 1970, that opens up an entirely new way of booking. Because before, clubs tend to just book, bands to fill the dance floor, is what they're doing. They just want those butts in the seat, is what they want before. But all of a sudden, the Armadillo, when it came about, they're not just booking rock and roll. They're booking country. They're booking progressive country. They're booking traditional country. They're bringing in lots of local bands. They're bringing in Freddie King. They're bringing in everybody. They're bringing in Flaco Imanez with Ry Cooder. You know, it's amazing. So all of a sudden you've got a venue here in Austin that is bringing everything in.
Austin claims to be the live musical capital of the world, which is totally true. But what we're missing here, but it's happening, and it's happening slowly. I mean, we've got Google here and Apple, but we're missing. We should be the live music business capital of the world. The music scene here is definitely like no other scene I've experienced. It's a real sense of connection and a real sense of support. But once you put yourself out there, the community is definitely there to help you in every way possible.
It's called Mondo Fuzz.
Oh, so it's Mondo.
Yeah, and that actually was my way of capturing all the things I did like about Austin that are currently.
It's a perfect snapshot of right now.
Yeah, it's just all my favorite people and bands and every location I really like to go to. I tried to cram it all in because they're disappearing faster than you can film them, and you know, I just wanted to show people who haven't lived in Austin what the big deal was, because if you come now, you're so bombarded with things that are like a cliche or a caricature of the town.
Do you like Austin the way it is today, or do you miss how?
I miss the way it was.
Miss the way it was?
I really miss the way it was. If I could pick like my favorite time, it would probably be maybe the mid '80s, because it was a good time for Austin. It was a great time for music. I think it was one of the last really pure rushes of music before everything just got so over technologized and underwritten by corporations and everything. And there was just, you know, it was just a good time. It was the early years of the Chronicle, and you know, it seemed like the whole future was ahead of us. You know.
I think the present is the best. Only because I think we are again at a crossroads. I mean, when we moved here in the 80s, I didn't quite completely understand the culture. You know, the stereotype that we had, that everybody has when they first move here, is you're gonna buy cowboy boots and cowboy hat and you're gonna say yeehaw. Yeah. And Austin is not that. Austin is very far from that. But I think we're at the crossroads again, whereas the big question is, okay, where are we? Because there are all kinds of people moving here.
It used to be unbelievably cheap here to live. You could, you know, rents were like, in the mid 70s when I was in graduate school, I had a 2-bedroom apartment for $125 a month. I was paying $60 a month rent.
And the days of cheap rent are over.
That's right.
Back in the 70s, my husband and I had a magnificent little rock cottage over in Travis Heights that we paid less than $200 a month for, and there's no way in the world you could do that again. But what those cheap rents allowed you to do was work at these fun jobs, work at having this esoteric career, and you could make enough money to get by.
I think it's pricing out people who have been there for a long time. I mean, fortunately, I've managed to hang on, but it's been difficult, and I'm a hard worker, and I see so many people that I know, musicians and writers, the artistic types that make Austin what we are, that are being forced out of Austin.
There's just condos everywhere, tearing down all these old, beautiful houses to build condos.
Like, how long have you been in Austin?
7 years.
7 years? Okay.
Yeah.
So you've seen the transition.
And I lived in one of those terrible condos when I first moved here, but I've learned my ways, and now I live in a really old house. They just sent an appraiser out to our house, and they're going to sell it soon. So yeah, almost Hyde Park.
Okay.
It's beautiful. right next to Waller Creek. They built these big condos next to us and sold them for millions of dollars. And now our landlord thinks he can do that too, so yeah. We're all getting kicked out.
Sure. Is it not a surprise to you how fast or quickly Austin has become?
I'm sort of pleasantly surprised. It did take off there, but I think that the high-tech industry helped a lot, the music industry. A lot of people visited the University of Texas for various things.
Right.
A lot visited the Capitol, saw what an interesting place Austin is, and moved here. You know, and the same thing that happened to me happened to a lot of people too. They came here as students, and you know, loved the city, figured out how to you know, get around here, had friends, and kind of liked the quality of life. But I think all in all, there are a lot of good things that would recommend us to a young person looking for a place to live. And what happened really is, I think that the public incorrectly believed that if we did not build roads, people would not move here. We have since learned that nothing is further from the truth. Because, you know, people have moved here and they are moving here. And right now that number seems to be a net 110 a day.
Crazy, yeah. And I was just reading, like, California gets a lot of flack for being like, oh, it's all the Californians moving, screwing up our real estate values. But I was just reading something which makes perfect sense to me, and I see this too, is that it's actually mostly other Texans that are moving to Austin from like rural areas or even like other big cities. Kind of sucks that it's gotten more crowded, but at the same time, we get a lot of other benefits that like larger cities have, like a more cosmopolitan food scene and stuff like that.
There's lines everywhere in Austin. Yeah, like we went to go get biscuits the other day and we had to wait for 20 minutes.
It's like
for a food
Disneyland
cart
there, yeah.
For like orange juice. You decide to go out and you decide like, oh, we're not gonna find parking, let's just stay in. Like that's what does it.
Yeah, that's pretty discouraging.
You know, I'm super flattered that people wait. I think it's the coolest thing. I think it's really weird that the line's kind of become its own thing. You know, I feel like some people just hang out in line just to have fun. You know, what are you doing on Saturday? I'm gonna go drink beer in a parking lot, meet some new people, make some friends. I mean, people make friends. People end up just eating lunch together. People end up making friends in line, and they keep coming back, you know, on the same days and meeting up at the same times. And you know, it's kind of become a cool scene, but it's I don't know. I think it might be a little bit separate from the barbecue place at this point. It's almost kind of taken on its own meaning in a lot of ways. You know, a short wait is fine. A long wait is we're starting to feel kind of bad. And at this point, like I just feel so bad for people. It's 100 degrees out here. You know, we can only do so much. We send free snacks out there to kind of tide people over a little bit because we know it's going to be a long time. We go out there, we do waters, we're going up and down the line constantly, being like, well, what are you going to have? You know, make sure that we've got enough food to feed everybody and then a little extra. How many cities in America could that kind of thing flourish? That's the cool thing about Austin. That's the cool thing about the East Side, too. You've got like artists, musicians, you know, people trying to open food trailers, people trying to open restaurants. You can do anything you want if you try hard enough.
Do you see Austin as a hipster haven, and how would you describe a hipster?
I would probably agree with that assessment, that it is a hipster haven. The word hipster is really hard to just define, though, I think. I guess like part of it is because Austin has a large youth population, like people in their 20s. I think a lot of people in their 20s are probably just hipsters by default. Okay, a hipster, I think, is someone who puts a lot of thought into what they wear, and has a lot of, either you could call it like respect for like underground music, or is just like inordinately obsessed with like knowing the latest underground music. I don't know.
Hipsters are people who wear colored sunglasses, like colorful sunglasses,
Oh my
like the
God,
ones you're
I'm
wearing.
totally a hipster.
So you might be a hipster.
Oh, you might be a hipster if. We could start a whole comedy routine on that.
There's nothing wrong with being a hipster, being cool. It's just the ones who are just kind of more into style and owning the right things rather than, you know, just
being yourself.
Being yourself and being artistic, being bohemian or whatever.
culture of the city has changed a great deal. I remember when Wilhelmina Delco was first elected. She was the first elected public official outside of East Austin as far as a large geographical area, and that was a big deal. You know, Austin eventually, slowly but surely, became more inclusive, but it's still somewhat segregated because, I mean, if you go across Mopac, you don't see that many African Americans or Hispanic that live across Mopac.
Let's talk about that. So East Austin is Austin's rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. You're right, historically it was, for at least a part of its history, it was the African American part of town. Before that, it had Swedish and German and Irish immigrants in it. So it's been sort of, I don't want to say melting pot, but maybe a salad bowl. It's been a port of entry for Austin for decades and decades. But now, gentrification, and gentrification is basically defined as lower income households being displaced by higher income households, and thereby changing the fundamental character of the neighborhood. Some people would like to add the caveat of lower income households of color being displaced by higher income Anglo households. That's the case in many situations, but there are examples around the country where the gentrifiers are African Americans. Anyway, so East Austin is really gentrifying at a rate that we've never seen before. And so what does that mean? Well, it means property values are skyrocketing. In 78702, from 2005 to 2012, they saw a 200% increase in their median single-family house value. So that's putting enormous pressure on low-income renters, fixed-income seniors, and at least right now, the bulk of that pressure is being felt by the Latino community. The African-American community that historically lived in East Austin, I believe, began to leave in large numbers really before the effects of gentrification became so profound.
I grew up in Park Slope in Brooklyn, which is very gentrified, and it was going through all those changes when I was a little kid. So I wasn't like super aware of them. But now, like the same things are happening on the east side on a smaller scale, but they're definitely happening in terms of gentrification. And so it's interesting to be an adult and to be more like sensitive and aware to them as they're happening and trying to document them too. But now, because of gentrification and more people are moving over there, it's becoming more developed. It has condos, right? It has boutiques. That's changing the cultural landscape of the neighborhoods. And so one project that I did was on East Austin churches, small Baptist churches. That, you know, church was a huge part of the East Austin community, as it is in many communities. It's a place where everyone comes together to pray, to eat, to talk, to just catch up with people. And so some of these churches, you know, they've been around for 70 years, but they're falling apart. No one's really going anymore. I think there's a number of reasons why. I think people are less interested in religion than they used to be. There's less of a coherent community, and because of gentrification. So I documented some of those churches and took portraits of the people that were there. But I think that's just one example of many of how it's changing.
I have mixed feelings about it because, I mean, where we are, I would think that gentrification is going on. It has happened. But when you have individuals who have had the property and they did nothing with it, and someone else sees the opportunity and sees the moment, then you can't be really upset. I mean, it was yours in the beginning. You decided to do nothing, or you decided to sell. Other people saw the opportunities that were availing itself in a particular area, and then take advantage of it. Now, what I don't like is that, and as far as East Austin is concerned, is that you have these, I guess they were built in the 30s and 40s homes, and then you got next door, you got these McMansions. Well, at some point in time, when you build homes like this, property tax values are going to go up. And at some point in time, the property tax is going to be more what your particular structure is worth, and you won't be able to afford to tax it. So at some point, you're going to have to move or build a structure that's comparable to what your neighbor is. Right. So, you know, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because, one, the city gets more property tax revenue. Bad thing, a lot of individuals, particularly older citizens, gets displaced because they can't afford property taxes.
My guess is that all things considered, we are better off today than we were when I moved here in 1970. But the population is about twice what it was. I mean, it's twice the number of cars on the street, twice the amount of crime. At the same time, you got a whole lot more retail establishments. You got more jobs. You got jobs that pay more. See what I'm saying? And I just think that you have to take the good with the bad. The law does not allow us to put up a fence and keep people out.
It would be cruel to wish that we weren't economically successful, because the opposite has its downside. And it should be said that Austin has a 20% poverty rate. You just don't see them.
I think that Austin did get sold. Essentially it got branded and packaged, and people like it. I mean, it's a nice place to be, and why not? And then we have this wonderful little advertisement for it every March called South by Southwest, in which the world comes and goes, oh, this is wonderful, and so it's Austin is what it is. It is what it is. Like I said, the three things, football, politics, and music are going to be one of the three topics you hear in almost any table around town, anywhere you go, and they're what drives Austin more than anything else, I think.
Well, first of all, I'd say Austin and San Antonio are both great cities. We're just different. Strong military presence here. We need to do a better job of communicating across the United States what the opportunities are here. We've got a very low unemployment rate. We continue to create jobs. We had a net increase in population the last decade by 350,000, so we're growing. We just think we're on the process of building a great city, but we're not there yet.
The other thing is that we have more than our share of good jobs that pay well. But at the other end of the spectrum, though, we have about 15 to 20% of our residents who are not doing well at all, and it seems to me that we have to keep making investments to improve their lives. Because the more poor people we assist, I think we lift all of us up.
So Metro Austin is about 2 million. Metro San Antonio, 2.6, 2.7 million. Put those together, and you've got something that's 4.5 growing on 5 million people. And again, increasingly it will be interacting, but the big friction is I-35. There's really only one way to get in between two cities.
And I think that's having the diversity, if I can use that term, the differences between the two at that point become really powerful, because the stability of San Antonio can lend some of that to Austin, and Austin's rapid growth and that can maybe bleed into San Antonio.
Because Austin and San Antonio are like kissing cousins. we're close together on the map, and so many cultural things are in common, but what's really cool is the differences too.
I split my time between both cities pretty equally, and there's so many different things I love about both of them. I mean, I never knew that I would love so much about San Antonio, being as it's, you know, my family's from here, and I would always say, oh yeah, San Antonio is a great place to visit, but I don't want to live there, and I'm actually glad to have both of them.
San Antonio's better. I always have fun here. I don't know if it's just because we visit your parents and they buy us dinner, but I always have fun here.
I feel less stressed when I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to be the case of Austin. Now it's just, the congestion gets me.
You know, if I couldn't live in Austin but had to stay in Texas, I would definitely go to San Antonio. I just like San Antonio. It's a cool place. I mean, there's great buildings, there's really cool houses, there's getting to be some pretty awesome food around there. One of many food weaknesses happens to be a puffy taco.
I want to see San Antonio continue to grow and expand and have more opportunities, but not lose its lameness. Not lose its character.
I'm going to chase the dream, and wherever the dream takes me is where I'm going to go, which is hopefully not my whole life in San Antonio.
I see myself here for the foreseeable future. You know, I mean, I'm from the Houston area, and Houston to San Antonio, 200 miles, that's a fairly small radius to have spent my entire life. But I love San Antonio, and it's been a really interesting time to live here because so much is flourishing.
I like to travel as a photographer, as a photojournalist. It's something that I feel like I have to do. And so I really love my job right now, but I think I'll maybe do it for another year or two. And then I'm gonna quit and go travel around for a year. Then maybe I'll come back. My parents moved here actually 4 years ago. And my brother just moved here less than a year ago. They all followed, yeah.
I think we're about to get out of there. And,
Sell the place. We're gonna get out for a while. Mexico.
I'm thinking Mexico, yeah.
I really just want to learn Spanish and sell cactus to people. And eat a lot of avocados. Eat more avocados than I already eat.
Like after I graduated, or actually when I was in college, I was like, I want to live in Austin because, you know, music and acting, and there's just kind of more going on there, and I like the vibe there. The people are just so laid back and so cool and all that. So I wanted to, but you know, somehow I just kind of ended up staying here in San Antonio. But now looking back, I'm really glad I did, because there's no way that I'd be living in, you know, kind of the nice house that I get to live in here.
My fantasy, if I were king, I'd love to see a high-speed bullet train. I mean, the full-on deal, where we could step on the train over here at the station and be looking at the Alamo out the window in about 28 or 29 minutes. Maybe one stop, San Marcos, I don't know, there'd be a lot of debate who would get that one stop. Maybe no stops, I don't know. I'm not sure you'd want to do it without any stops and make them quick. Yeah. But then that would begin to stitch the region together. You'd have more, you'd have just sort of more casual interaction, you'd have more economic interaction.
Well, with everything that's happening between here and there, and San Marcos being the fastest growing town of its size in the nation, pretty soon it's just going to be like one big city.